1 in 4 women in the U.S. will be targeted by an abusive partner in their lifetime. Female victims most commonly experience their first domestic violence incident between the ages of 18 and 24. Women account for 2 out of 3 murder victims killed by an intimate partner. Victims come from all economic backgrounds. Tonight, we want to end the silence, the shame, and the pain. Coming up, we will open the phone lines to hear from you and answer your questions related to domestic violence here in Prince George's County. You don't want to miss this.
It started with arguments, disagreements. It started with a simple argument with me saying no, and then the no's became you're not allowed to say no. So the arguments came, then the pushing, the shoving, the demands, and there was such guilt in me because I felt like part of it was my fault and that I needed to make it better. I wasn't aware that it was domestic violence, but I'd seen some things growing up in my family and maybe in other families, but didn't associate it with anything. Just families acting out, families having misunderstandings. And when people say, well, I would have just left. It's not that easy though, because domestic violence is associated with such shame and guilt. And the shame and guilt takes over everything. And it also leaves you in a situation where you feel responsible, or you think that you can love this person so much that you can make a change in the person. But I quickly learned that I couldn't make a change in the person, but I was stuck in such shame and guilt that I dared not let anyone know that I was going through what I went through. The turning point happened more than once. There was an encouragement, there was a set of boldness that took over me more than once that said, I've got to get out of this. But interesting enough, I didn't know how I would get out of it though. I was stuck. There was so much control and there was so much guilt and shame. So getting out of it would mean that I would need to tell the truth about my life. That this life that I was living, this lie that I was projecting would be exposed now. People would know the truth about me. If it wasn't for the healing that I had already started prior to meeting my current husband, I don't think I would have met him. But I will say that it's been such a blessing because when he met me, I had just started my nonprofit. I had just started talking. So he was exposed to something very new. But he was extremely supportive, not understanding this at all, but extremely supportive and just the love and compassion and patience that he has for me. It means so much.
Welcome to Silence No More, a conversation about domestic violence. I'm your host, Taylor Thomas. You just heard excerpts from an interview with Sheila Malloy Hall, a survivor turned advocate for others living or dealing with domestic violence. And she shared what she said is not uncommon to people who work with victims like this, but it's the reason why I felt and we felt here at CTV it was important for us to go live and talk about this. Joining me now in studio is Denise McCain, the director of the county's Family Justice Center, our state's attorney Aisha Braveboy, and our new sheriff John Carr. Welcome.
Thank you.
How are you?
Thank you so much for having us.
I appreciate it. It's a serious conversation. I appreciate you guys making time for this. So much has happened since the beginning of the year as it pertains to domestic violence. But after hearing that, Denise, I'm going to ask you first, what comes to mind, because you service women and men like this all the time? What comes to mind when you hear and see?
Well, you know, what you heard is the comments from a very typical survivor. More often than not, they don't come forward. They don't talk about it because of the shame, the fear that's associated with domestic abuse. I think that many survivors who are in these situations, just as you heard, they oftentimes feel responsible. Somehow they contributed to it, and thereby they deserve what happened to them. They're afraid to let others know because they don't want the shame that oftentimes comes with the abuse. And then really they don't know where to go. They don't know where to go for help. They don't know who to talk to. And so they stay in this vicious cycle where they suffer in silence. And so what you heard is very common for many survivors.
Sheriff Carr, when you heard that, what comes to mind?
What comes to mind for me is actually interacting with those survivors who feel like they have no power. Basically, they feel obligated to stay in a situation and feel, whether it be financial, whether it be because of family members, whether it be because of that embarrassment, dealing with them, the fact that they would want to continue down this road and this path because they don't want their significant others to actually get in trouble. They don't want their significant other to leave them. They don't want their significant other to feel hurt or pain or to be embarrassed. So a lot of times when we do respond to these homes, a lot of the survivors are going to side with their abusers. And what our roles and responsibilities is to, one, advise, to be there for them, to try to make them whole again. But the resources are here in the county, and we want to make sure that they're able to get those resources so that they could make that decision and have that power to leave a bad situation.
State's Attorney, what do you think when you hear that?
Well, I lost a cousin to domestic violence, so when I hear about people who are concerned about where they're going to live, it makes me really think about how fortunate we are here in Prince George's County to have resources to provide housing for individuals who are facing domestic violence, because we don't want them to stay in unsafe spaces. And so our office actually has a grant that assists with housing for individuals who need to move out of a dangerous situation. And so while it is sad, and each and every case is unique and different, and there are different factors in every single case, what I am just committed to doing even more is making sure that individuals have the tools that they need to leave, to get out of the situation so that they can really thrive in their lives.
So very important. Well, we are opening up the phone lines. We want you to join in on the conversation. The number is right there on the screen. Now we're going to take a very quick break, and when we return, we're going straight to the phone lines.
911, operator 901, where's the emergency?
127 Brymere.
Okay, what's going on there?
I'd like to order a pizza for delivery.
Ma'am, you've reached 911. This is an emergency line.
Large with half pepperoni, half mushroom.
You know you've called 911. This is an emergency
Do you
line.
know how long it'll be?
Okay, ma'am, is everything okay over there? Do you have an emergency or not?
Yes.
And you're unable to talk because...
Right.
Is there someone in the room with you? Just say yes or no.
Yes.
Okay, it looks like I have an officer about a mile from your location. Are there any weapons in your house?
No.
Can you stay on the phone with me?
No. See you soon. Thank you.
Welcome back. Let's go right now to our first caller. Her name is Monica Dudley. Thank you for joining us, Monica. If I'm correct, your sister was murdered last week in Laurel, charged as her boyfriend, the father of her youngest child. What would you like to add to tonight's discussion?
Good evening, and thank you for having me on. I totally agree with everything that has already been said, and I believe for my sister, it was kind of a mixture of everything that everyone has said. You know, she was dependent on him. I believe she was afraid to, come out and be open and honest about what was really going on. And it's like, for me, as a survivor of domestic violence, I'm fortunate that I am able to have lived, able to tell my story, and I just, hope for more awareness for women to, when they see those red flags, when they get those first signs of it, to leave before it's too late.
Monica, were you aware of your sister's situation, or was this a surprise to you?
I was aware of the controlling and the argument, but I never thought it would have ended in the way it ended. So I did not see like a violent part of it, but I did see he was very controlling, very manipulative. So there were some red flags there.
Monica, I have to thank you so very much. I know that perhaps our guest may want to share something with you, but I have to thank you for taking time. I know your family is still dealing with the loss. I believe there's 3 children now, correct? Without a mother or father.
Yes. So, well, the youngest, who's 1.5, it was his father that committed the crime. So, yes, he is now without a mom and a dad. But the other 2 younger ones, the dad is still there, fortunately, but they too don't have a mother anymore. So yes, 3 children without a mom.
I see you shaking your head, Denise. This you've heard this probably a million times over, right? Doesn't change.
It
doesn't
it's
change
so sad, and my condolences to the family for the loss, a senseless loss. Domestic abuse is one of those things, again, as you even heard, that people don't realize how serious it is. They always think it's never going to escalate to the point of death, but and unfortunately, that's the time, if you're lucky enough to survive a very violent incident, that it's a wake-up call. That's usually what it takes for people to realize that this is serious, that I need to get help. We encourage anyone who's in an abusive situation, to reach out to someone and get help, because silence perpetuates the violence.
In talking to people before we did this show, oftentimes, even the guest, Sheila, was saying that her friends saw different things and they spoke to her, but it wasn't anything like forceful, like you've got to do something. And I guess just like she was just saying, Monica was just saying, she saw a little bit but never thought that could happen. What do you say to someone like that?
People don't really see it for what it is. I think that's the problem, particularly in public, around family members. They're generally, even if there's an argument, you just chalk it up to it's an argument.
Yeah.
But what goes on after that argument behind closed doors is usually very different. And unfortunately, that's what people don't see. So sometimes they're afraid to interfere, to step into the personal lives, the relationships of others, and they don't say anything. But you have to speak out. If you suspect that someone is in an abusive relationship or things just don't look right, say something, because that's all a survivor needs to know, is that someone is there for them.
So Sheriff John, you just mentioned you'll go there and the victim, not all the time, will defend the person allegedly harming her or him, right?
Yes.
So at what point are you able to say, listen, I have to take you out of the home for your safety? Can you do that?
Yes. So as the situation escalates, it determines what the deputy or the officers will actually do in order to ensure safety. So the sheriff's office is responsible for serving peace and protective orders throughout the county. You're talking about a situation where you go to the courts are now providing you some relief as far as separating the 2 parties. We actually vacate individuals from the home along with taking individuals into custody. Sometimes we may have to do 3 or 4 different contacts, as they will then reunite in their relationship. You have a family member that may speak on somebody's behalf and ask them, hey, it was an argument, this person will go to counseling or get treatment. But a lot of times you have folks who are really suffering in silence, where others are not advising them and assisting them on a day-to-day basis.
So there's no limit to where, I've been here 5 times, this is it. You cannot come back no matter, is there any limit, anything legally that can be done?
So let me just say this. I think it takes, and Denise can correct me if I'm wrong, about 7 to 8 times for a victim to decide to leave, to finally leave.
Wow,
and
that's a
so
lot.
And so while we would like them to leave at the initial sign of any type of violence, and violence doesn't just come in physical form. There's emotional violence, there's mental violence, there's financial violence, and that may not be actionable in a court of law. Like, I may not be able to prosecute someone for being emotionally violent, but it is a sign that physical violence is likely to result if the situation isn't handled properly. And so what we all have to be is patient with those individuals who do call out for help, because oftentimes they do go back. And we can't forget them. We can't say, well, we've had enough. We've been out here enough times. I mean, I know the sheriff will go back and go again, because we never know when that time is going to come where that person will actually decide to leave. But also, if the sheriff does arrest someone and file a statement of charges against that person, whether the victim cooperates or not, if we have enough evidence to move forward with prosecutions, we do so, because we understand that death can result from continued violence.
So very important. We need to take a very quick break, but the phone lines are still open. We want to hear from you. The number is right there on the screen. We'll be right back.
Home. It should be a space where we all feel safe. But for some, home can be a dangerous place with no escape. But while one voice might go unheard, a chorus cannot be ignored. Together, we can help free those harmed by domestic and sexual violence. Join the chorus and say, no more.
Seconds to your set.
Good evening and welcome back to Silence No More, a conversation about domestic violence. Joining me in studio once again is Denise McCain, the director of the county's Family Justice Center, our state's attorney, Aisha Braveboy, and our very new Sheriff John Carr, who've been joining us here. I want to take a second, if I could, Denise, to talk about some statistics as it pertains specifically to Prince George's County.
Well, you know, we look at national data. And nationally, what we know is that 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men will be victims or have been victimized by an intimate partner. If you take that information and we look at Prince George's and we look at our population, if we think that 79% of the population is comprised of 79% of females between the ages of 18 and 64. That's roughly 383,000. If we look at the 1/3 for the 1 in 3, we're talking about over 127,000 potential victims, women who could be victims of domestic abuse. And for men, we're talking about over 85,000. But of course, this is a severely underreported incident. The overwhelming majority of people who are involved in these situations never come forward. They never call the police, they never speak about it. We say that statistically maybe only 25% ever speak up.
Wow.
So the overwhelming majority we don't even know about.
I see you shaking your head, State's Attorney.
Yeah, and you know, we know that there are folks out there who are suffering in silence, and unfortunately who case might end up in our office. And so we are really aggressive. We have implemented a high-risk, high lethality protocol. We've also have instituted the county's first strangulation protocol when we fought to make strangulation a first-degree felony. So we've been working really hard. And so I think some of the positive news is that we have seen a 40% decrease in intimate partner homicides in Prince George's County over the past 3 years. And so that is the good news.
That's huge.
But there's still violence happening. There's still familial relationships that are broken. And so what we have seen, I don't want to say it's a rise in, but certainly from the standpoint of homicides, is other family types of relationships having disagreements that end up in homicide. So it's not what you think of typically in an intimate partner relationship where there's violence, but we're talking about brother and brother or a father and son or some other type of familial relationship. And so I think more focus and conversations need to be had around how to address the issue of general family violence.
Sheriff Carr, do you believe that COVID has escalated situations for many people, not just here in Prince George's County, but obviously that's your area of jurisdiction, but do you feel it's increased situations for families?
Yes, extremely. So during the pandemic, we noticed that there was an average or an uptick monthly in reference to peace and protective orders that were issued by the courts. So currently right now, we're still averaging over 2,000 peace and protective orders a month. So that is something in which the office of the sheriff must go out and we must serve. We noticed that during the pandemic that the abusers and the victims were basically locked down together. And then when you talk about the financial restrictions and, as far as people losing their jobs, you're talking about families, people who may have lost a loved one, the pressures of life. We noticed that people were dealing with it in a violent way. So during that pandemic, those numbers skyrocketed up over 2,000, and it has stayed consistent since that time. So what we're trying to do from the Office of the Sheriff is, one, work with the wonderful partnerships here with the State's Attorney and our Family Justice Center, as we need them to assist us in touching and making everybody whole again. But two, also starting to work with our youth, because we understand that in a lot of these homes, you have the youth in the homes. And one thing we don't talk about as far as that trauma. So just because a law enforcement or the Office of the Sheriff, we address the situation, and let's say we take an abuser out of that home, who's there for those families? Who's there to deal with those kids and to deal with that trauma? So they'll still carry that trauma and still carry the images of a loved one being abused or seriously injured or even killed. So one thing we try to do is to actually touch our youth about positive relationships, what it means to have a positive relationship, what it means for somebody to talk to you in a caring and loving way, to try to combat domestic violence at an earlier age. And then we also have our special victim advocates at the Office of the Sheriff that actually walk the victims or survivors through that process, through the court process. And we have our lovely connections with the Family Justice Center and Dr. McCain, and able to assist us with that in referring additional services. So
that's so smart to think about the children, because that may be something you forget. Even if they weren't involved with it, they still can directly be affected by it. And teaching them something as simple of how you talk to someone, how you treat someone, could be very, very important. I don't want you to go away. We'll be right back with more with our wonderful guests that are joining us here tonight, dealing with domestic violence. Denise, when we come back, I want to.
It should be a space where we all feel safe. But for some, home can be a dangerous place with no escape. But while one voice might go unheard, a chorus cannot be ignored. Together, we can help free those harmed by domestic and sexual violence. Join the chorus and say, no more.
Welcome back to Silence No More, a conversation about domestic violence. Now we have a phone caller, and thank you for joining us tonight. What is your question or comment for our panel guest?
Are you speaking to me?
Yes, how are you?
Oh, hi, how are you? Thank you, I'm sorry. I have a situation to where my daughter was in a domestic violence situation for years. I forgot, it's like seven years older than her. But what happened is that he put her out, I don't know how many times. This last time he dumped all of her clothes out in my neighborhood, just tore trash bags up and scattered them on the grass in the neighborhood in front of my neighbors. And I went and had to get her stuff. Had to send Ubers for her when he slapped her down in the hotel, slapped her to the floor in the hotel. She went back. But what happened this last time, when he had her, he would play games all day in the room, make her sit in the dark with him while he played the games. If he lost some game, I don't know about gaming and all that, then he would curse her out and call her all kinds of names. And this day he had her in the room, and this is what was happening. He was calling her all kinds of names, and they got to fighting, and this time, for the first time, she fought back. And this is unbelievable. She scratched his face. Now, they say scratch him up and clawed him like an animal. Scratched his face and had a scratch on his neck. He called the police, and my daughter tried to make it to the bus stop in the neighborhood. He showed the police the scratch on his face. I'm talking about the scratch. I didn't say like he put his whole handprint on my daughter's face and sent her back to my house. They came and arrested my daughter at the bus stop because they asked her, did she scratch him? She said yes. They arrested her. She sat in PG County's jail for 18 hours. Had to go before, I don't know anything about the law, the judge, the magistrate, whoever it was. They let her go on her own, whatever you call it. They let her go, and then she has to go back to court. So she feels like, why did I even fight that? But the day I fought back, I got arrested. After all the times he beat the crap out of her, made her sit in the dark, called her all kinds of names. She's a victim of that traumatic thing when she was a teenager in middle school. Went to court and everything else for being bullied. Won the case. The girl got arrested and all this. So she's just been, at Johns Hopkins. They said she had PTSD, was on medication for anxiety and all this. And the day that she decides to stand up for herself and fight him back, she got arrested. So what do I tell her?
So Denise, ma'am, first of all, thank you so very much for caring enough about your child to call in here. Denise, I see you shaking your head. Actually, everyone's shaking their head. And I know at topics like this, we always run out of time, but I have to have each one of you at least respond something shortly with her. First of all, maybe a number, but
yeah,
yes.
It happens frequently. Unfortunately, whoever the primary aggressor is, and you can talk about it by law, that's who they have to arrest, unfortunately. In that situation, I would strongly encourage her to get support, legal support. At the Family Justice Center, we have a wealth of resources. As was mentioned, we provide free legal services. We have civil legal attorneys there that could accompany her to court and hopefully be able to convince the judge that she, in fact, is a victim and that she was basically protecting herself.
This is so crucial. We'll have to bring you guys back on here. I know that we're just touching the iceberg, and I know we have a number of calls. Again, like I said, we can never have enough time to talk about this, but I truly appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about that. And Sheriff Carr, real quick, I know that you may want to interject because this is what you do, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
As far as legally, I mean, with the law.
So in this situation, and again, we do see it on a consistent basis, unfortunately, as we get to a scene of a call, you're looking to see who was the primary aggressor, and you're actually looking for visible injuries. So that was the reason probably why she was actually detained and arrested. But one thing I would make a suggestion is we have to document that information. And when I'm talking about she's actually able to put in a protective order as they were intimate partners, so it can be documented that she was also a victim of during this domestic situation. And as we document this is something that she actually has court record to say, hey, I'm in a domestic violence situation, and even though I may have been viewed as the aggressor at this moment in time, here's the whole picture. And I think everybody needs to see the whole picture. This is something that had been going on for a while, and now she unfortunately has been arrested for that.
And so we're going to circle back around because we have to go.
Which is why it's important for people to report it, because she then has a history, a record of showing that this is an ongoing situation where I have been the victim.
And I have to, again, strongly recommend that they reach out to you at the Family Justice Center for assistance.
Yes.
Not neighbors, not friends. Speak to people who understand the system and understand the law. I cannot thank you enough for joining me tonight, and the viewers and the callers for taking part. It's a serious discussion. We do not have to hold this just during Domestic Violence Month. Here, everyone here at CTV thanks you all for your participation, and we will see you next time. Thank you.
It's none of my business.
No more, I'm sure they'll work it out.
No more, it only happened once.
No more, he said he was sorry. No more, why doesn't she just leave?
No more, not my problem.
No more, but he has such a bright future.
No more, he didn't mean it.
No more bystanding. No more ignorance.
No more excuses.
No more.
If you're buzzed and doing this to make yourself feel okay to drive, you're not okay to drive.